Okay.
Should be good to start.
Good to start?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Third week of our history lesson. It's a little different tonight because Deacon Bob and I are the only ones here. But because of that, he can be 16 feet away and I don't have to wear a mask. So that's good for a change, but it's unfortunate that we don't have everybody in the room, but hopefully you'll get a lot out of this class. It's a very controversial class. This is Christianity and Islam. But when I start going over all of the things about Islam tonight, you're going to find it strengthens our own faith. And one of the things I've learned over time is when we question our faith, it actually increases it, at least in my book. So we're going to go into Christianity, Islam, and the Crusades tonight. So with that, we're going to start with what I start with every week, is the branches of the church. So at the time that Muhammad was born and Islam started was right around between these two councils here and the Great Schism in the 11th century. So we're going to review the medieval era that we went over last week just real quickly so you have some context as to when it was actually happening. So the first items that were happening between 500 and 1300 AD, I mean, it's a lot of time, it's 800 years, but there grew an acute crisis of barbarian invasions that cut off the Roman Church from the eastern part of the church. And that caused a lot of, well, there wasn't an ability to work together as well as they used to. Also, there was this schism of the Eastern and Western Christianities, which was caused partially from the first bullet point. The second item also brought up a lot of social upheaval, decline in the church's power, as we said last week. And at that time, right at the same time, there was the rise of Islam. The churches had to do something, and they had to unite East and West because the Christian lands were being overrun, and the Eastern and Western Christians were being martyred. And we'll go into what's going on ever since Islam has been in existence and what it is today briefly. But when you go into this, you can see that there was a lot of dissension going on. And on top of the dissension, Islam was growing, and they took advantage of that and started to take as much land as they possibly could. So this is the map I showed you last week. This is the map of Europe around 600. So Muhammad was around 570. He was born, and he died in 632. But if you look at the European theater map, and remember what we said about the Eastern Church being split right about here. So this was the Western Church, and you had the Eastern Church. The Eastern Church was being attacked heavily by Islam at the time of Muhammad and after, okay? In the meantime, there was a lot of dissension, like I said, over here. So as things progress, I will explain what happens with all of the territories in Western Europe as well as what happens in Eastern Europe during this phase. So this is a drawing of Muhammad. And Muhammad actually was born in 570 AD, and he died in 632. Now, I did mention in a couple of the other classes that I've been all over the world. I've been in Indonesia, which is the heaviest Islamic community in the world. It's 98 to 99% Islamic. Now that's in Asia, of course, but I was also in Saudi Arabia, and I've been in Bahrain. I actually stayed in Bahrain most of the time, and I brought something to show you that I got when I was over there. I actually was staying in a hotel, and the concierge was there. And when you go into the hotels over, even in Indonesia or any of these majority-held Muslim countries, when you go into the hotel, they actually have an arrow on the ceiling in your hotel room to point to Mecca, so you know which way you have to pray the 5 times a day that you have to pray. We'll get into that because it is actually pagan, so we'll talk about that. But they have that in the hotels, and they usually have a Quran in the hotels. Now, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, you are not under any circumstances supposed to have a Bible in your possession. That is completely unacceptable. If you are a non-citizen of Saudi Arabia and you are caught with a Bible, you are kicked out of the country immediately. If you are a citizen of Saudi Arabia and have a Bible, far worse happens to you. Okay? So, as I said, I was in a hotel in Bahrain, and they had these hard-covered Qurans. And I went down to the concierge, and I said to him, I said, I saw one of those Qurans in my room. And he kind of looked down for a second, and because he knew I was a Westerner and probably a Christian. And I said to him, is there any way I could purchase a Quran? And he got a big smile on his face, thinking that he was going to convert me. And he goes, "Oh, no, I will gladly give it to you." So I went back up to my room, and in less than a half hour, he gave me this hardcover copy of the Quran. Now, it's in Arabic on one side, and on the other side, if you flip it over, it's in English. Okay? So it was very interesting to have this, only because I always wanted to understand how they could justify why Jesus Christ is a prophet and not the Son of God, as well as like 50 other things. So it was very interesting to get this. They believe in the Virgin Mary, but they believe that the Virgin Mary only conceived within 7 days. I don't know where they got that, but even with that being said, how could they not consider him the Son of God if he was, basically born without sin and, the Son of God conceived by the Holy Spirit? So, a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about have correlations between both the Quran and the Bible. So let's get into the history of Muhammad and basically his life first. We'll get into the Crusades and why we went against them and all of the things about the fight between Christianity and Islam. But let's get into some background, because most Christians do not understand anything about Islam. So, as I said, he was born, and when he didn't become a prophet or seek his first revelation until about 610. There is little concrete biological information about his life in the Quran itself. Muhammad is considered to be the founder of Islam, although when we start going into stuff, when I start showing you stuff tonight, you'll realize that a lot of their beliefs, their rituals, etc., comes straight out of the pagan religions in the Arabian Peninsula hundreds of years before Muhammad. Their religion existed, as far as they are concerned, since the beginning of time. Now, in his early life, he was born, like I said, in 570 AD in Mecca, okay? And his father was a merchant. His mother, her name was Abdullah, or I'm sorry, his dad was Abdullah, and his mother was Amina. Muhammad belonged to the clan of Hashim, and when I start explaining this, there was a religion called the Quraysh, and it was also the most powerful tribe in Mecca, the Hashim, okay? Muhammad's father died before he was even born. His mother died when he was 6 years old. And 2 years later, his grandfather was taking care of him, but 2 years later, his grandfather died as well. He was actually raised after that by his uncle, Abu Talib. At age 25, Muhammad was employed by a wealthy merchant by the name of Khaja. And he ended up having a daughter who her hand was offered to him in marriage, and he accepted. That was his first wife. She actually was a Christian. When in 1610, when he had his first revelation according to the Quran, he said that the angel Jabril, which in Arabic is Gabriel, told him because his father-in-law and all of his protection in Mecca had disappeared because they had died, that he needed to leave Mecca. So basically, he was trying to convert everybody in Mecca, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And because of that, the only thing that was stopping him from being either killed or run out of Mecca was his father-in-law and his wife. When they both died, he had nobody to cover him anymore, and so he had to leave Mecca, and he went to Medina. Okay, so in 622, the elders drive Muhammad out of Mecca because they want nothing to do with Islam. Muhammad could now be attacked without retribution, and he was no longer safe in Mecca. So at that point, in Medina, Muhammad continued to serve as a prophet. Now, if you start looking at when we start going into the details about what's a prophet and what's not, he's not a prophet, but they consider him a prophet, okay? The Meccans were not content to leave the Muslims in peace, and between 624 and 628, there were numerous battles that were fought between the two sides of they're actually called the Qurans, not like the Quran, but they were the religion that was there prior, and they ended up making a treaty with them, the Mohammedans or the Islamists and his followers, to make a pilgrimage to the city the following year so they could go back to Mecca. And they were supposed to have a 10-year peace. However, they broke the Meccans, the people from Mecca, broke the treaty. And in 1630, Muhammad marches with an army against the city. Mecca is conquered by the Muslims. That's in 1630. Now, if he's a prophet of God, why is he running into Mecca with an army to kill everybody in its wake? Muhammad lived for all of 2 more years after 1630, during which Islam was spread to the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. So that's the life of Muhammad. By the time of his death, the Arabian tribes had embraced Islam, which is what he defined the religion as. It's almost as if it's kind of a Scientology type situation, but it happened in the 600s, 1400 years ago. And when I start going into the details, you'll see why I say it's more of like a Scientology type situation, where somebody created a religion, okay? They had embraced Islam as their unifying cause. With Arabic language and militaristic zeal, the Arabs would coalesce rapidly into a formidable force. So, let's see if I can get this. So, Islam, the actual Arabic word Islam is Arabic for submission. Muhammad believed himself to be the sixth and the greatest himself. He figured he was the greatest in the line of major prophets sent by Allah. Now, when we get into Allah, Allah is not God as we know it and we know is to be true. We'll get into that shortly. He sought to initially incorporate the Jews into his religion, but when the Jews opposed him, just like the religion in Mecca at the time, then he turns against them and he wants all Jews to die. He focused on Abram as neither Jew nor Christian. Now, when we get into that whole part of it where he considers himself a descendant of Abraham, when you go back to the religion that he actually started it from in Mecca, it had nothing to do with Abraham. It had to do with a God called Allah, as well as 360 other deities or gods underneath. Okay? And he said that he was descendants from Ishmael rather than Isaac. So Ishmael was the one that was banished into the desert with his mother, and he interpreted it in his writings that they were descendants of Ishmael. But we'll get into that again when I start getting into the actual Islamic faith. He rejected the Christian Trinity completely, and he believed that Jesus was a true prophet of Allah, but not divine. So right there, you know this is a false religion immediately. Immediately after he died, there was a break immediately into two factions in the Islamic religion. After Muhammad's death, there was an immediate split. The elite members of the religion that he had founded wanted to choose a successor, and they were considered the Sunni majority, named for Sunnah, or the tradition. The faction wanted a blood heir, another faction, to be the successor. They wanted the grandchildren. Now, one part of the situation with Muhammad was Muhammad actually had a son and a daughter, but obviously sons are the priority, and his son died in one of these battles against the former religion. So the only one that was left was his daughter, and his daughter married a man by the name of Ali. That's where the name Ali comes from. And they had 2 boys. And so several things happened here. One, you had the Sunni majority, or the traditional imams of the religion, that wanted to just take the next in line to be the next caliph, okay, or the head of the order. These ones that wanted a blood heir wanted one of the 2 sons. This became very similar to a Cain and Abel situation. What happened is, while one of the sons who actually followed the Sunni majority or wanted to follow the tradition, while he was praying, the other faction went into the mosque and beheaded him. This is how the religion started. The head of the religion itself was beheading people in Mecca to start the religion, and now you have the grandchild being beheaded because of the factions between the Shia and the Sunni. Now that's been in the news 1,400 years later, and the Sunni are the ones that are in Iran. I'm sorry, I got it the other way around. The Shia are the ones in Yemen and in Iran, and in Saudi Arabia it's the Sunni, and there's multiple factions within them. The Shia eventually took control after 2 caliphs were assassinated. So I mean, they were killing off the heirs, at least the people that they wanted to run it, just so they could continue and get what they wanted as far as a blood heir. So why is Islam not of God? There's multiple reasons, and I'm just going to go into some, and I have a ton of handouts, as I always do. But it explains why, in 10 points, why Islam is not of God. First of all, Muhammad is not a prophet. And the reason why he isn't a prophet is that in Deuteronomy it states, it tells us that God will authenticate those he sends as a prophet by having them perform signs. Muhammad, in his entire life, gave no signs as required by God. Okay? Another example of the same thing is in Deuteronomy, it says Islam, let me do the statement first. Islam cannot be from God because Muhammad's teachings do not pass the second test of God for a prophet, which in Deuteronomy again says, no prophet will bring a revelation that is in conflict with previous revelations. His revelation must agree with the previous revelations of God. None of the writings of Islam do so. In fact, they deny Christ. Number 3, Islam cannot be of God because it denies the existence of Jesus as God. Number 4, Islam cannot be from God because Muhammad frequently changes his revelation to suit the circumstances. So one time he's saying you must not drink, you cannot drink any kind of intoxicating beverages, which when you're in Saudi Arabia, if you're caught with any kind of alcohol, you're in deep trouble. But every Thursday, so on Friday is their holy day, on Thursday I'd go from Dammam, Saudi Arabia to Bahrain across the 30-kilometer bridge, 20 miles, and all of the Arabs from Saudi Arabia are running across to Bahrain so they can party like crazy men all weekend, and then on Sunday morning they're coming back across the bridge to go back in. Okay? Number 5. Islam cannot be of God because it appeals to man's lower nature rather than higher nature. And what I mean by that is this. Jesus says, if you follow me, you will have eternal life. Muhammad says, if you do not follow me, I will kill you. That is a far, much different circumstance. Islam's morality is inferior to the New Testament. Same thing as what I just said in the statement before. God tells us to love our enemies. Muhammad and Allah, according to the Quran, says kill your enemies if they don't believe. Okay? The other thing is that it says that Islam cannot be from God because it is based upon a document the Quran made after God said revelation was finished. 8. Islam cannot be from God because it's based upon the Quran, which has internal contradictions. Any revelation from God will be consistent with itself. Islam cannot be from God because the Quran frequently contradicts the Bible. And again, it goes back to revelation prior cannot be contradicted by revelation in the future. And finally, and most importantly, Islam denies the crucifixion of Jesus. They not only deny that he was conceived by the Holy Spirit. I take it back. They believe he was conceived by the Holy Spirit and he was born of a virgin. You can look in the Quran and it actually says that, okay? But they still don't believe he's the Son of God. And then after that, when you get to the crucifixion of Jesus, they say it was a hoax. It was just a hoax. So if you go just on those points alone, it's a false doctrine. Now, one of the things that they also do as far as, has anybody ever seen this? This is the main temple, the primary temple at Mecca, okay? And what has to happen is that everybody in their life, according to Islam, must go to Mecca and do a pilgrimage to all of the holy sites, including this mosque. And what is within that box is called the Kaaba. And the Kaaba is a meteorite. Okay? And when they pray 5 times a day and they have to face Mecca, they're not facing the city of Mecca, they're facing the Kaaba, which is a meteorite. Muslims across the world face this holy site of Mecca and pray. Mecca is believed to be the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad, but when followers visit the site, it's not actually Mecca they are facing, but it's a building called the Kaaba. Okay? And what they have to do, this was really interesting. They had a TV station when I was there where it was just like a camera just showing this so you could see the pilgrims circling. So they have to actually circle this 7 times, and they have to get to the center where they can actually kiss the meteorite. The Kaaba is built around a sacred black stone which is tucked away in the eastern corner about 5 feet off the ground. Muslims believed Muhammad once kissed the stone, and during their mandatory once-in-a-lifetime trip to Kaaba, they tried to kiss the black stone if possible. So that's completely in opposition to their own faith because they believe that it's an idol, right? So they have a problem with idols, but when you get to this stone, that's not an idol. But because Muhammad kissed it, you must kiss it, okay? All right. So now we get into the term called jihad. And jihad is basically a holy war. Okay? The Quran promotes a twofold division of the earth. Jihad means holy struggle, and it is official call to the faithful to engage in a holy war on behalf of Allah. Pre-modern era jihad orientated itself towards conquest. Today, I've edited this statement. Today, promotion of defensive jihad until the caliphate of ISIS. And defensive was a pretty generic term because they've been trying across northern Europe, or not northern Europe, northern Africa and Palestine and all of that area to take it over and eradicate the Jews, eradicate any Christians, And we'll get into that because the Coptic Orthodox have been having a major problem trying just to, we've got a lot of martyrs today. We've got a lot of martyrs today. And we'll go into that towards the end. Terrorism today is the radical sects who view the Quran's twofold division of the earth in the literalist manner and see all non-Muslim nations as enemies of Allah and infidels. That includes other Muslims who they think aren't orthodox enough. Okay? So this is the Islamic Empire from the time of Muhammad. So Muhammad actually, by his scimitar, conquered all of the Saudi peninsula before his death. Anybody who did not follow him died. Then the next caliph came in, and that was the Patriarchal Caliphate. From 632 to 661, they took all of this orange territory here. And then from 661 to 750, they managed to take all of this territory going right up to India, going into the Kazakhstan and Afghanistan and everything, all the way. And then they also took the rest of northern Africa, and they took almost the entire country of Spain. Now, there's an airline called Iberian Airlines. Iberia is the Islamic name for Spain. So at this time, that was called Iberia. You'll see this map again. So the Muslims believed that they had a sacral state. Muhammad's system melded religion and the state. It's all a theocracy. That's why to this day Saudi Arabia is a complete theocracy, and you do not practice any other religion in public or get caught in private in the country of Saudi Arabia. When I went to Saudi Arabia, the first thing I needed to do is get a visa, and the visa has a line on it right away. It says, "What's your religion?" If you put, "I'm Jewish," you don't get in. I have a friend who is of the ancient religion of Zoroastrian, which incidentally is what was in Mecca before. And that's, remember in the Ten Commandments, where Moses comes down and they're worshiping a bull? That's Zoroastrian, okay? He put Zoroastrian down, and the Saudis said that is not a recognized religion, okay? So when I put Roman Catholic, they figure, he's Catholic, we'll let him in, okay? So very well, that concierge, because he had a copy of my passport, already saw my visa and knew I was a Roman Catholic. So when I asked for a Quran, he figured, heyday, I get to convert this guy. Well, he's not gonna, but that's why he was so excited to give me a Quran. The caliphs are seen as guardians of Islam. Now, caliphs are like the bishop or the cardinal in our religion, and they coordinate the imams, okay? And if a caliph requests a jihad, then everybody starts working towards a holy war. That's what ISIS was. It was the ISIS caliphate, or a caliph told everybody it's time to move out and start attacking. Islam today is comprised of various sects which are divided over interpretation of the holy books. Very similar, they're broke apart kind of like Christianity, but to a point, this is the thing. I have Muslim friends at work, and they're good people. The thing is to consider it a religion of peace is not accurate because it wasn't founded on peace. It was founded on murder. Murder in the name of their faith. The conquests of Islam. Islam benefits from war between the Persians and the Byzantine Empire. So I'm going to show you a picture in a bit about why that other part fell. This part over here fell. And that's because the Persians, the Iranians, give you an interesting historical fact about why it was Persia till World War II and then it became Iran, but I'll get into that in a second. The Persians, or the Iranians, and the Byzantines, which were the Greeks and the Turks combined, were fighting, and because of that, Islam took advantage of that situation, and while they were fighting each other, they took all of that land. Islam holds sway over Mesopotamia, so that's Iraq, Palestine, which is Israel at this point in history, and Syria, and much of North America. In 2 decades, they had all of that territory. In 711, the Moors crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and conquered Spain. So that's on that map. Islam advanced and was checked at Constantinople. They got Nicaea, but after they started moving forward, they were actually stopped by the Eastern Orthodox and the forces that were in the Byzantine army, and then they petitioned the Pope to assist. So that's when we start getting involved in the Crusades. Not right away in the 700s, though. So the influence of Islam in the West. To the east, Islam is checked, okay? To the south, the Muslims crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and crushed the weak Visigoth kingdom, and Islam spreads towards South Asia. And like I said, at this point, I don't have the history of how it got so far over to Indonesia, but Indonesia is the largest Islamic country in the world at this time. So that was the spread in Asia. So, before we get into the Crusades, which we're going to touch on right away, but I want to get into more of the Islamic information so you understand. So I talked about the Kaaba. So remember I said that Allah was not a term of God that we know. There was a God in the religion prior, the pagan religion in Saudi Arabia called Hubal. And there was moon worship practiced in Arabia since 200 BC. Now, what's the symbol of Islam? It's the crescent moon, and it's also the morning star, right? In Mecca, there was a god named Hubal, and he was lord of the Kaaba. The roof of the Kaaba is about 400 years before Muhammad. So he was there in what, 600? So 200 AD, the Kaaba already was there. This may, in fact, be the origin of why the crescent moon is on top of every minaret in Islam. About 400 years before the birth of Muhammad, the king of the Khatan had put an idol called Hubal on the roof of the Kaaba. That's that black box. This is one of the chief deities of the Quraysh before Islam. The moon god was also referred to prior to Islam as Al-Ilah. This is not the proper name of this single specific god, but a generic reference meaning of God. And it was the local tribal pagan god was Allah. Allah was later shortened to Allah before Muhammad began promoting his new religion in 610. So the term Allah was already there for 400 years at least before Muhammad came into existence. Islam is derived from paganism that once worshipped a moon god. Although Islam is today a monotheistic religion, its roots are paganist. Before Muhammad appeared, the Kaaba was surrounded by 360 idols, and every Arab house had its god. The goddess worshipped in the shape of a square stone, Al-Uzza, the mighty, a goddess identified with the morning star and worshipped as a thigh-bone-shaped slab of granite between Al-Taf and Mecca. This is one of the points that the Muslims have to go when they do their Hajj. They have to throw stones at a rock. They have to do a bunch of different things. But that's one of the points that they have to go to. And Manat was the goddess of destiny and worshipped as a black stone. This is way before Muhammad. They worshipped as a black stone on the road between Mecca and Medina, and the moon god Hubal. So this stuff was there way, way before, and it's clearly pagan, clearly. And I'm going to have all of these documents that I'm reading from that you can get copies of. I'm going to send them to Deacon Bob as well as Teresa, and just ask for them and you'll get all of them, okay? Interesting, not many Muslims want to accept that Allah was already being worshipped at the Kaaba in Mecca by Arab pagans before Muhammad came. In fact, he did not first intend to establish a new religion, but rather to reform the belief in Allah which already existed. Which is interesting. That kind of correlates with Luther too, but you know. But it was definitely trying to reform a pagan religion, and then because he was having so much pushback, he started incorporating Judeo and Christian things into it, okay? Like I said, this is very Scientology. Let's create a religion out of all of this other stuff, okay? The Arabs before the time of Muhammad accepted and worshipped after a fashion a supreme god called Allah, or Ilha, or the god, in a form of a genuine Arabic source, if of Aramaic from Allah the God, seemed absolutely certain. So there's tons and tons of evidence that that is the case, okay? Okay, so now I'm going to get into the Crusades, okay? Okay, there were actually 9 crusades. The ones at the end were kind of fizzling off, and some of them were complete disasters that never should have happened. But the crusades happened between 1095 and 1291, just shy of 200 years. Now remember I said that the Persians and or the Iranians in present day were fighting, and because of that, the Byzantine army was trying to fight them off over here and in their own lands, and the Caliphate was able to take all of this land and Nicaea. So that's what we're talking about. They took all of this, they took all of this. The causes of the Crusades, there's multiple reasons why the Crusades happened. One was this, of course, but it came down to also political things, just like what was happening when we were talking last week about the Western Church and, science changing things and everything else. There were other reasons besides the Muslims taking all of this land. One was the Byzantine, as that picture shows, the Byzantine emperor wanted to regain lost territory and defeat a threatening rival state. The Pope wanted to strengthen the papacy in Italy and achieve ascendancy as head of the Christian church. Now you remember that there was still this schism going on, right? Right around in the middle of all of this between the East and West. So they wanted to ensure that the papacy was that way. And by the way, the patriarch here over in the Eastern Church is begging the Pope for assistance in the war. Okay? Now, today we always say, but the merchants also had a gain in this thing, and they wanted to monopolize important trading centers. Remember, you had trade routes that went all the way across like this, and down into here, and across into Saudi, and across into northern Africa. So they wanted to monopolize on the important trading routes currently under Muslim control, and also earn money shipping crusaders to the Middle East. So what would happen is you'd have the French and the Italians and the Spanish and the English coming through, and they'd go across the Mediterranean. Halfway point was Sicily, where my family's from, and if you do like Ancestry.com, you got a lot of different countries on Sicilian soil. So in the meantime, the Seljuks took full advantage of the military neglect because of what was going on with the Persians and the Byzantines, okay? And in 1078 created the Sultanate of Rum. And I had that up there. There you go. This. With their capital at Nicaea. And Bithynia, I don't see it on the map. This is a pretty sparse map, but in the northwest Asia Minor, which was captured by the Byzantines in 1081. Pope Urban at the time received Alexios' appeal in 1097, but it was not the first time the Byzantine emperor had asked and got papal help. In 1091, the Pope had sent troops to help the Byzantines against nomads who were invading the northern Danube. So, like I said, the Pope was trying to gain influence with the Eastern Empire. In November of 1095, Urban II called for the First Crusade in a speech during the Council of Clermont, France. The message, known as the Indulgence and aimed specifically at knights, was loud and clear. Those who defended Christendom would be embarking on a pilgrimage, all their sins would be washed away, and their souls would reap untold rewards in the next life. So all of these men were very devout Christians, and they believed that if they gave themselves to the glory of God, that they would have quite a reward in heaven if they died in battle. Now, as far as the merchants were concerned, that really they didn't really start taking advantage of that until the Second Crusade. Let me get to the Crusades. I'll go back to that one. So the Second Crusade was 1147 to 1149, and they said they got lucrative contracts and were drawn up beforehand to ship armies across the Middle East. The Italian trading states of Venice, Pisa, and Genoa, as well as Marseille and France, were particular rivals, and each was eager to gain a monopoly on east-west trade. So you had all of these supplies and personnel going to war. It's just like the war industrial complex in modern times, but that's what was going on. It should be remembered, though, that these cities also provided plenty of religious zealots keen to fight for the Christian cause and to make cash from it. And some of this stuff started happening as things went on. And let's see. European knights, even knights and princes too, joined the crusade for religious principles, a reward in the afterlife perhaps, or a pure ideal that Christians and Christian sites must be protected from the infidel. So both sides are calling the other one an infidel. And I mean, if you go into history, this happens quite a bit, all the way into the 1600s with the Protestants and Catholics in Europe. For willing knights, there was also a chance to win booty, land, and perhaps even a title. Land might have to be sold and equipment was expensive, though, so there was certainly a major financial sacrifice to be made on the onset by going to war. So there was a lot of things that were going on. So the first crusade started, as I said, in 1095. In 1096, Christians in Europe heeded the call of Pope Urban and joined up with throngs following local noblemen in a crusade to regain the Holy Land of Jerusalem from the Muslims. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is 1095. But what's interesting is that in 637, Jerusalem was officially surrendered by the Christian Patriarch of Jerusalem, Saint Sophronius, to the Muslim Caliph Umar in 634 to 644, thereby solidifying Arab control over Palestine, control which would not be gained again until the First Crusade in the 11th century. So the Eastern Christian Church gave up Jerusalem almost 400 years before the First Crusade. Now we're going back because of the attacks on the Byzantine Empire and the Eastern Orthodox Church, and now Spain, which is the Western Church, and we're trying to get the lands back as well as redeem ourselves as far as our population who's had it with being attacked by people. In 1096, Turk army massacred the Christian army from Europe, also known as the People's Army, ending the first of the religious wars known as the Crusades. On December 1098, in what was now Syria, the Crusaders gave it back and massacred 20,000 Muslims and even ate some of them. In July of 1099, during the First Crusade, Christian soldiers took the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem after the final assault of a difficult siege. The Crusaders finally captured Jerusalem. On February of 1113, the reigning Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope Paschal II, issued a papal bull recognizing the Order of Hospitallers, the military order of Catholic knights that has existed in the Holy Land since 1099. The city would one day become the most populous city in modern Syria. Aleppo was hit by a catastrophic earthquake. And then the Second Crusade starts. And basically, they fought Saladin at this time. Now, at this time in the Second Crusade, Saladin told the Crusaders, just leave my merchant trader routes alone. And I've read both sides. I actually have books on the Crusades from the Arab side. I have books on the Crusades from the Crusader side. And basically, it was kind of a setup. They knew that some of these Crusaders were going to attack because they didn't have any supplies. And when they attacked them, that gave Saladin the go-ahead to attack the Crusaders. Crusaders went out to fight. Now, at the time, they had the holy relic, what they believed to be the cross of Christ that they got from Golgotha, and they had it in a reliquary. And every time they went to battle, they would take this reliquary out in front. Well, Saladin actually won the battle, captured the cross, and it's never been found since. Luckily, some of the remnants of the cross, prior to it going to that battle in the Second Crusade, were taken slivers off of it by the French Crusaders, and also there are some of the slivers in Deacon Mike told me it's in one of, I don't know if it's in the Holy Sepulchre Museum. Is that where it was? So there's pieces of the true cross that still exist there, and they still exist in Notre Dame in France. The Third Crusade, Friedrich Barbarossa in 1189, he was the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, arrived at the capital of the Serbian king. During the Third Crusade, Barbarossa drowned in the river Salif while leading his army to Jerusalem. Prior to that, one of the church councils, was to actually excommunicate Barbarossa. We're not going to do the councils, but maybe the next set of weeks for history we'll do those, because that's a class or two by itself. King Richard of England and King Philip of France met in France to set out together as far as Lyon, where they parted after agreeing to meet in Sicily. Richard said to number 800 men, went to towards Jerusalem. Now, Richard is, you go into all kinds of stuff. Richard the Lionhearted was the guy who left in the old Robin Hood stories, and then his brother took over the crown in England. Richard the Lionheart was the king of England who went to the Holy Land. The assassins assassinated in 1192 Conrad of Montferrat, king of Jerusalem, only 2 days after his title to the throne was confirmed. Richard and Saladin finalized the treaty granting Muslims control over Jerusalem, but allowing unarmed Christian pilgrims and merchants to visit the city. Now, I have something here that was interesting that they actually did to Christians and Jews. This was a couple hundred years before, but in the 8th century, a Muslim ruler banned all displays of the cross in Jerusalem. He also increased the penalty tax, the jizya, and forbade Christians to engage in any religious instruction. This is very similar to what goes on in Saudi at this time, even with their own children. In 772, the Caliph Mansur ordered the hands of all Christians and Jews in Jerusalem to be branded, so they knew that they were Jews or Christians. Stuff's been going on forever. So this is the map of the Crusader states. So you had the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which is almost the exact same area that Israel occupies right now. And then this, the Kingdom of Tripoli, this is actually part of Lebanon. And then the province of Antioch, now you're starting to get into Syria, Armenia, Edessa. Okay. And then they had Cyprus as well as over here in Asia Minor. Thought I had. Thought I had another slide. So some of the saints that actually were crusaders as well as saints, one of the greatest ones was St. Louis, or Louis the Ninth. Yeah, that isn't going to help. I'll give you these handouts. But Louis the Ninth, and if you ever go to France, it's really amazing because he brought relics back from the Holy Land. One was that Palatine Cross. One of the other great relics that he brought back was the Crown of Thorns. And the Crown of Thorns was brought back. He did 2 crusades. He brought it back after the first crusade. And he actually, if you go to Paris, you have 2 buildings on the island where Notre Dame is. Notre Dame, and then there's another building. It's actually governmental offices right now, but within the walls, that was actually St. Louis's basically castle, and he built a cathedral within the walls called Sainte-Chapelle, or the Hat. And that actually, I was fortunate enough, I went there a lot on business, but every time I went to go, it was blocked off because it's a governmental facility. But I was really blessed the one time that I went with my wife and my son, it was open, and we were able to go in, and we were actually able to go into Sainte-Chapelle. The crown is no longer there. It's in the vaults below Notre Dame. They only bring it out once a year on Good Friday for adoration. And it was in Notre Dame when the fire hit. But the firemen were so panicked about the relics, they were willing to sacrifice their life, and they just did like a bucket brigade with all of the relics in the reliquary. They have the old sanctuary is now a reliquary. They got every relic out of there, including the Palatine Cross, everything. And they got it out of Notre Dame before it burnt. But St. Louis was a great saint. That's what the town St. Louis, Missouri is named after. He was actually made king at a very, very young age. In 1229, Louis took personal command of troops in the field for the first time at 15 years old. He was very happily married to his wife Marguerite. She was the daughter of the Count of Provence. He and Marguerite had 11 children. In December of 1244, Louis was gravely ill with a form of malaria and vowed to go on a crusade if he recovered, and he did. The same month, Pope Innocent arrived in Lyon to preside over the General Council. Now, remember, we were talking about the papacy had moved to France at this time. So you got all of these correlations with things that were going on. And he arrived in Lyon to preside over the General Council. The the following June, and the main business of that was to depose the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. On 1248, Sainte-Chapelle was consecrated, that building I'm telling you about, and on June 12th, right after, he went on his crusade. In 1250, they won the Battle of Mansoura. However, on April of 1250, St. Louis was captured by the Mohammedans and his army was crushed. As God would have it, the Sultan of Egypt was then overthrown and instead of being put to death, St. Louis was ransomed on May 6th. He proceeded to the Holy Land after his ransom was paid, where he stayed until 1254. In the meantime, his mother died in 1252. 1267, he took the cross again and went to his second crusade. He arrived in Tunisia with two of his sons, Jean Tristan and Philippe. Typhoid epidemic raged. On August 3rd, Jean Tristan died, and St. Louis followed him on August 25th. On August 1297, St. Louis was canonized after the church examined 65 miracles attesting to his sanctity. If you ever get a chance to go to Paris, there's a bunch of wonderful things there. St. Catherine Labouré is there uncorrupted. That's an amazing thing to see. But if you go to Notre Dame, there is so many relics. And what was very interesting is that in the French Revolution, they lost at least 60% of the relics. But when the Nazis came in, the Nazis were occultists. And they hated Christianity, but they feared the relics. They didn't touch one relic. And they're all still there. And they have St. Helen's femur bone. They have St. Louis's tunic. There's just so many things there that are just incredible. And the Palatine cross. So it would be really, really wonderful if you could ever have an opportunity to see those relics. There were many other saints that were also crusaders. A couple of them were martyred during the crusade, but as an example, St. Leonard of Reresby, he was from England. He died of natural causes, but he was captured in Saracens and was miraculously freed. And when he got back to Yorkshire, England, he evangelized. St. Gobert of Apremont, he was the Count of Apremont. He was a crusader. He was a Benedictine Cistercian monk in Belgium. He also died of natural causes. St. Matthew of Beauvais, he was a soldier, a knight who fought in the First Crusade. He was also captured at Saracens. He was ordered to renounce Christianity. He refused to and was martyred. He was beheaded in 1098. St. Nicasius of Jerusalem, soldier, member of the Knights Hospitaller. He was a crusader, fought in the defense of Acre, captured by the Saracens. They ordered him to renounce Christianity and convert to Islam. He refused and he was martyred. He was beheaded in 1187 in Acre. Gilbert of Nefontaines, he was born of nobility, fought in the Crusades with King Louis from 1146 to 1149. When he returned home, he convinced his wife and family to let him follow the call of religious life, a hermit. He was a pre-monasterian monk, founder of the abbot of the pre-Monstranasian monastery of Nefontaines, which is noted for its hospital where Gilbert cared for the sick. And I have a couple other ones. Basically, Gerard Via Magna, he was an esquire to a knight. As a crusader, he was captured, ransomed, returned to Italy, lived the rest of his life as a hermit. Saint Bonfilius of Foglino, born of nobility, Benedictine monk and abbot of Santa Maria Abbey, where he was known for his knowledge of Scripture, became a priest, noted and popular preacher, bishop of Foglino, Italy in 1078, pilgrim and crusader of the Holy Lands from 1096 to 1104, after which he retired to see from his see to return to life as a monk. So I have that for you as well. I want to go over just briefly. I think we're only going to have about we got 15 minutes. So, Christianity and Islam today. So with all that I told you about Islam and all that I told you about the fight between Christianity and Islam, we believe in God, true God. They believe in a pagan God, which they followed the moon for 2,000 years, and it is still their symbol. There are many things that justify why it is a false religion, and it is one of the largest religions in the world right now. And I think it is a very dark force in our world at this point in time. The Iranians, let me explain how their name changed from Persia to Iran. During World War II, the Persians were still considered Persia, and the ambassador from Germany, from Nazi Germany, went to Iran and said to them, "Why do you call yourself Persians?" And they explain themselves, and he goes, "But you're truly the Aryan race." The Aryans, if you actually go far enough back, the Aryans, not the pure blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, Aryans, not the non-Trinitarians. The people called Aryans were actually in the steppes around the Caspian Sea and stuff like that, if I can show you. This area, this is called the steppes, okay? It's where they believe the Tower of Babel and stuff like that all happened. So you have the Fertile Crescent like this, right? So the Nazi ambassador got them to rename their country Iran as Aryan, and they've been known as Iran ever since the Nazis convinced them to change. Now, there's many things that are going on right now in the world, and I mean, we're trying to have peace right now in the Middle East, and people are starting to make treaties with Israel and stuff like that. But we've got a war going on in Yemen where the Iranians are actually backing one side, and the Saudis, the Shias and the Sunnis, are both fighting down here, okay? And we've just got a lot of dysfunction and a lot of bad stuff going on right now. Now, when we look at this Islamic empire, okay, and you can see the outline. Oh, geez, I'm getting hung up on this cord. You can see the outline. Now, look at what the intended caliphate was supposed to happen with ISIS. Exact same area. A little more. They wanted to get this far. But they want Iberia back. They want all of that back. They went to about here before. Now they want to just spread a little further north and further west. Now think about what happened when Syria was running away. All of the people were running away from the ISIS caliphate up here. You think about what happened. They've always wanted to take this territory, right? So what they did is they had all these refugees, most likely infiltrated with tons of ISIS people, and they let them flow into Europe, bloodless coup. And then what they ended up doing was none of the Arab countries took any of the refugees in. They only let Europe take the refugees in. Why? Why? But then the king of Saudi Arabia says, you know what? He goes to Angela Merkel and he says, folks, he says, I really appreciate what you're doing for all of the refugees. So what I'll do is I'll give you half $1 trillion to build as many mosques as you need in Europe. It's very nice of him, isn't it? So it's very scary to think of what's going on in the world right now. And you have to realize that when ISIS was going on, I have friends who are from Egypt who are Coptic Orthodox. He was petrified of his family back in Egypt because they were killing Christians, and they were killing Christians in Syria. They were burying them in sand and then decapitating them, or they'd stick them in cages and dump them in the ocean. Faith right now, and it's the same thing that was going on back then. And we just need to pray constantly, because there's a lot of things going on in this world right now that there's a greater war than just the 3 dimensions we see. And I just hope that God will always protect us, but I hope we can eradicate the evil that's trying to take us out. So with that, I don't know, I think that's all I got for tonight. So next week, what I'm going to do is I was going to do the church, the modern church. But what I'm going to try to do, rather than go into like right now to basically the 1900s, I'd like to actually do the Reformation part and go over the breakup of the Christian church that we have here, and start around the 16th century. Was kind of where I ended last time, and with the Islamic stuff, we've gone past that. So now I'm going to start next week around the time of the Reformation and the printing press that we talked about last week, and then we'll start going into what caused all of these splinters and what that did to the church. So until next week, thanks everybody, and hopefully we'll get to see each other again soon.